US Airlines are warning travelers about the suspension of TSA pre-check and global entry programs due to the ongoing government shutdown. The Department of Homeland Security announced that these programs will be paused starting 6 a.m. ET on Sunday, February 22, affecting over 20 million pre-check members and 40 million vetted travelers. The suspension is part of emergency measures to redirect staffing resources as Congress failed to approve additional funding. Airlines for America CEO expressed concerns, stating that travelers are being used as political football and urging Congress to reach a deal. Affected airports include major hubs like Los Angeles, Miami, Chicago, Atlanta, and John F. Kennedy. Travelers are advised to plan ahead, arrive early, and expect longer security lines. Well, Arise analyst Rotimi Kade joins me now from Austin, Texas, to discuss this airline warning on TSA pre-checks and its impact on travelers. Good to have you this weekend. Now, is the suspension of these programs a necessary measure to prioritize national security, or is it a political move to pressure Congress into funding the Department of Homeland Security?
Well, first of all, I think the good news is that the Department of Homeland Security has walked back that particular news that was given earlier about the suspension of the pre-checks and global entry program, which obviously, sent outrage, which outraged a lot of people, and they're concerned about it. But right now, the Secretary of the Homeland Security did say that the pre-checks and the global entry program is still going to be operational, and as against the earlier instructions given that they're going to cut down on the program, which obviously will send some very bad signals to international travelers, and not just that, but also the country definitely will be at a risk of global security.
If that, thank God for that great news, but if that were to be in place, how would the suspension have affected travelers, particularly those who rely on expedited screening, and what are could be the economic constraints of longer security lines?
Well, say for the reversal, if the statement by the Homeland Security Secretary is anything to go by, it is expected that there's going to be long lines at airports, and it's going to make it even more difficult for the TSA staff, because we know right now that due to the shutdown, a lot of them are not getting paid, and according to what we heard, that they could be a little bit of they could be short-staffed at most of the airports. So it is expected that this will send shivers. There could be a much longer lanes at major airports, especially international airports.
So if the suspension, had, pulled through, I'm wondering, so how would that actually alleviate staffing, with regards to this conversation? Alleviate staffing in the sense that how would it, or will it lead to more, queues, and would it, for screeners particularly, being needed to process the same number of passengers?
Well, you said it right. It's going to have longer queues, and it's even going to be more difficult. So in the U.S., you have a lot of major airports with connecting flights. So people who are supposed to have connecting flight will definitely miss their flight for sure, because of a longer processing time, and that would definitely send a whole lot of people into some sort of chaos, anxiety, and all of that. But again, this is not the first rodeo, for the DHS. Recall last year during the longest shutdown, some staff actually stayed behind, and they were able to go through the rigors of, the influx of passengers, and some of them, were duly compensated when the economy was eventually opened up. And that is what is expected at this time. But of course, this time we don't have as much, less staff as they have before. So this time around, I think since they have been able to go through, the 43 days or 40 something days of shutdown before, it is expected that at this point there could be, much lesser constraints.
So does the suspension, even though I know that it's not in place again, the suspension of these programs, right, does it compromise airport security, given that vetted passengers typically require lighter touch screen? And how would that have, led to the shutdown or suspension of these programs impact public perception of the government's ability to manage national security and transportation infrastructure?
Well, this program was actually established in 2013, and over 20 million passengers have registered. So 20 million, take that 20 million, cut it into, the number of passengers that come through various airports across the United States. That is a huge amount of people that you can cut off with those long queues. And if that program is not in place, you could just imagine, that the airports don't have the capacity to actually go through the standard security checks, which would definitely overwhelm the staff. And of course, it's going to affect airlines. Airlines are not going to be moving on time. There's going to be delays. There's going to be cancellations, and that's what the pre-checks and global entry programs help to curtail. And if the suspension were to go on, that means that we're going to go back to status quo back in the days when you have longer queues at airports.
Now, this takes us to Congress. Let's bring them in here because the CEO, reading the news earlier, blamed, the political game ongoing in the U.S. as a result of the outcome of this. So do you think Congress should be held accountable for the impact of the shutdown on travelers and the economy, or will they shift the blame to the opposing party?
Well, I think Congress should be held responsible. Republicans and Democrats alike, if they can, level up and decide on certain certain policy, and both of them really coming together, then it means that there's a huge problem on our hands. And Democrats, being that they are holding the aces at the moment because they have certain demands for the DHS, for instance, in terms of what's going on in immigration, clamping down on immigration, ICE, etc. And ICE is just an arm of the DHS, Department of Homeland Security. So the Democrats really staunch on the fact that if they don't meet their demands, then definitely there's absolutely not going to be an approval going forward for the funding of the DHS. That is really a big problem, and I think Congress and members, whether Republicans, Democrat, or Independents, should be blamed for this. I think this resonates with a lot of airline executives saying that politicians are now politicizing some of these very easy policy program airport to secure the lives and property of the United States citizens.
Now, I'm going to put you on the hot seat. And I'm doing this because I want to know, what you think about the Trump administration in handling some of these issues of government shutdowns. On a scale of 1 to 10, how do you think the Trump administration has performed with regards, trade negotiations, allies, talk about airports? There's nothing that's not in the news, by the way, Rotimi, when it comes to the Trump administration. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how has the government, the administration of Trump, fared?
Well, when it comes to the negotiations of tariffs, I'm not going to give it a number to play safe at this point. I think it's going to be essentially that they are not actually pulling their weights when it comes to negotiating. President Trump did promise that he's a great deal maker. We've not seen him making some of those good deals, with Democrats. They've been at loggerheads, I would say, for most of the time. But eventually, I think the people that actually suffer is the citizens, because as they always say, if two elephant fights, it's the grass that suffers. So I believe that the administration may need to up their game in that regard to see how they can close gaps and find common ground with Democrats. And, when it's time for politics, perhaps maybe in November, then they can come up with, all this, shenanigans and all that. But for now, I think a lot of times they actually, perhaps, not focus on, why they're elected into office. Well, in terms of the tariffs with other nations, well, honestly, I think it depends on the administration that is in office. We've seen Democrats not playing the same game, long games with other nations. Why? Because they actually want to protect their diplomatic relations. But this administration think otherwise, and we'll just see how this goes.
Finally, before I let you go, how will the repeated government shutdowns and funding lapses affect the U.S. aviation industry's reputation and competitiveness globally?
Well, a lot, I would say. There are a lot of cancellations, and for so many people who like to come to the United States for tourism, for instance, a lot of them have decided not to because of these uncertainties in the airline industries, and also for the immigration uncertainty. Something like, like granting visas to come and, getting arrested by ICE and all that. So I think with data will definitely show in months to come whether this administration has fared well in this facets of the economy.
Right. Thank you so much, Rotimi Kade, for joining us, and thank God for that good news about the, the cancellation. Appreciate you for the time. He's a RISE analyst.